Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Ready, set, tamper, and off they go. It's the NFL free agency period, which through the pre-tampering period, Luke Jones was, towel off, crazy stuff, lots of loser franchises taking on big-ticket items, and certainly from the local perspective, more whining, complaining, jumping off the Bay Bridge, Key Bridge, flooding the tunnel, whatever the thing you want to say about it, but an ugly couple of days for the Ravens and a lot to recover from here and sort of a lot to unpack. I mean, whatever Christmas is, right, this is the opposite of that.
You're right. I mean, and there's the middle road, right? I mean, there's the two extremes where you point to every single contract that's been given out to a Raven and you say, well, good decision. I don't want to overpay. And then we go through this process as, certain fans do where, well, this guy's really not that good and it's smart that they didn't overpay. And then on the flip side, you have the perspective that you just presented that the sky's falling and they're absolutely doomed and Eric DeCosta stinks and bring back Ozzie and all of that. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. The players that they lost, at least some of them, they're going to miss. I mean, there are certainly individuals like a C.J. Mosley, like what Zadarius Smith offered this team the last year or two, even if you didn't want to go nearly as far as the Green Bay Packers did.
I mean, the money's crazy, but the money these middle-of-the-road safeties are getting, I mean, Baldinger was tweeting about that. Like, are these teams watching the tape? Do you really think that he can have that much impact on your football team at that level of salary? And maybe we asked that about Tony Jefferson a couple of years ago. Certainly we've seen that with Brandon Williams, and we've discussed that. Certainly the Jets and what C.J. Mosley got and what he is and what he can be. I don't know, man. I mean, all of this is so speculative. And when these teams have money to burn, and maybe this is a lesson for baseball, maybe guys do get paid more money when the teams have money to burn because they are so starved to win in Cleveland, with the Jets, with the Arizona these places that just say, we don't care what it costs, we're going to go all in. Bill Belichick never does that.
Sure, but at the same time, if we can keep saying overpay, but at some point in time that becomes the market, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, and you're right about teams that have cap space because you do have to spend to the cap over a given period of time, so it's not as though you just can sit out free agency every single year. And let's not completely say the Ravens are totally immune from this. This is a team that gave a wide receiver named Ryan Grant a big deal last year before something came up with his physical, and then they signed Michael Crabtree instead.
How in the world could Brashad Perryman get $4 million? How is that possible?
On a one-year deal, 1 year, $4 million is nothing at this point in time.
Right, exactly. And your contribution might be nothing, like it was for the Ravens. It was very little for the Ravens, I would say.
But at the same time, he played pretty darn well for Cleveland down the stretch last year. Caught a touchdown against the Ravens, if you recall, and he's a former first-round pick. So there's still some semblance of shine on him to the other teams. Now, the Ravens. If you would ask the Ravens after he asked out of his deal with Cleveland, and we'll get to that in a second, why he did that, but other teams look at him and say, well, former first-round pick, fast guy, Baltimore has a lousy reputation for developing wide receivers. Yeah, I mean, if I have the cap space, if I'm looking to take a flyer on someone, why not? So that's where you kind of see that from that regard. But at the same time, the Ravens, being a team that has lacked elite playmaker status, as much as Le'Veon Bell's camp tried to drum up interest in with the Ravens being involved, Le'Veon Bell ends up going to the Jets, 4 years, $52.5 million. Now, is that cheap? No. At the same time, you look at what that deal is compared to some of the deals that, let's face it, some middle-of-the-road kind of players got, and you do ask yourself, might that have been an opportunity that the Ravens could have explored? And according to Adam Schefter and according to other things that I've heard, Le'Veon Bell was far more interested in the Ravens than the Ravens were in him because apparently they never even made an offer. I know they had some different discussions from time to time, but Eric DaCosta talks to all agents from time to time about various players. So how much Le'Veon Bell really came up in the end with the Ravens, who knows? But it's very clear that he wasn't in their cards, and that's fine. I mean, philosophically, I've talked about this. I'm not someone that's really keen on giving a running back big money.
Well, the whole idea of this offense is anybody should be able to run the ball in it. Not anybody, but they made a star out of Gus Edwards, right? I mean,
and Kenneth Dixon ran the ball extremely well. Why I would have been intrigued at least by Le'Veon Bell and was entertaining the idea is what he brings as a wide receiver, essentially. Not as a wide receiver, but as a receiver out of the backfield, as someone who motioned out to the slot quite a bit for Pittsburgh. I think that element of his game was appealing to me. Him as a runner, of course he's very talented and has been extraordinary, but that part of it speaks to what you just said. The Ravens made 5+ yard per carry running backs out of Gus Edwards and Kenneth Dixon down the stretch last year. But the receiving element, knowing you have a young quarterback, knowing what Ray Rice meant to Joe Flacco early in his career, I could have at least seen it. But that goes back to what we were talking about the morning that C.J. Mosley decided he was going to join the New York Jets. We talked about this possibility that the Ravens are retooling, rebooting, rebuilding, reloading, whatever you want to call it. But this to me, the fact that they weren't even in on Le'Veon Bell and the understanding that he didn't get stupid money. He got big money, but he didn't get stupid money like he was hoping to get. That's another piece of evidence that makes me wonder if the Ravens really are thinking about this thing in the way of thinking they're going to win a Super Bowl in 2019.
Well, we spent most of the day on Tuesday discussing what their compensation would be for losing the likes of Suggs and Mosley. And,
right.
all of these guys going away to say, well, next year's draft, they're going to have 13 picks, you know what I mean? Or whatever that is. And if we're talking about next year's draft already and what picks they're going to have, we certainly are more targeted on 20 than 19, if not 21. And, that's a hell of a ways out for Lamar Jackson, but that would probably be when you would expect a train to arrive. And this would be all under the umbrella of, well, this is what the Rams did. This is what the Browns are doing to get better. This is what organizations do to reload and retool, and this is what you do when you have a 21-year-old quarterback. You don't think you're going to go win the Super Bowl. You think, let's go build something here so we can try to win 3 Super Bowls. And they're all in on Lamar Jackson in that way, I guess, unless they fall on their face and go upside down and go 3-13 next year and wind up with a 3rd pick. And then I guess they'll be looking at the next kid from Stanford or Texas or Alabama or whatever it'll be next year or the year after. But it does feel a little weirdly incongruent to some degree, and I don't know what they're going to do with all the money they've saved, the cap hits they're going to take this year on the guys that including Flacco, who feels like ancient history, and he hadn't even had his press conference in Denver yet, right? Like, it feels like he's been gone 3 seasons, and he's been gone 3 weeks because of all of the sort of hits. And then there's the part where Odell Beckham winds up in Cleveland, and then you start to say, is the dark side of the moon suddenly getting light, Luke Jones?
It certainly feels that way. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. If you look at that roster compared to what Baltimore has, Pittsburgh has, Cincinnati has, and you didn't know anything about the history of the Cleveland Browns, wouldn't you say they're probably the favorite to win the division on paper now?
Oh, they're a favorite to win the Super Bowl in Northern Ohio this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm at that point yet.
You're not friends with Darryl Ryder on Facebook. I am.
Sure. Oh, believe me, I saw plenty of the excitement.
And Munch and everybody else. I mean, I think even the factor of sadness may have cracked a smile or a smirk at least.
Well, you have a young quarterback that you believe in, and that changes everything. And you have the cap space and draft picks that they have. That changes everything. But I want to go back to the
karma's got to turn at some point for those poor bastards, right?
Of course. I mean, at some point in time,
Dude, I'm in Baltimore. Justin Tucker's the most famous guy we have here. He's the one we got left, right? Well, unless somebody from UMBC hits a buzzer beater this week, then maybe sure.
Right, and that kind of speaks to the territory the Ravens have been in. But I want to go back to the idea of the Ravens not being all in this season necessarily. And look, they could make 3 moves in the next 48 hours that completely changes our mind about that. If they hypothetically get
a center. Let's start with the center.
There's been talk about Mark Ingram. Okay, I mean, that's a move that really doesn't do much for me, quite frankly, because he doesn't bring the same dramatic receiving element.
He's no Smokey Brown. He's no $27 million receiver in Buffalo. Let me tell you that.
Right. But at the same time, what we're suggesting here isn't that the Ravens are going to go 2-14. And this concept of protecting their compensatory picks, that's not anything new. Let's not act like Eric DeCosta is completely changing the game here in Baltimore.
Well, that's a Ravens way of the world. I mean, Ozzy's always been great at that and manipulating that and saying, all right, let Assembly go, we'll get a 3 next year out of it, or whatever it'll be, instead of let's go back up the Brinks truck for all of our guys, right? Like, and even after you back up the Brinks truck in certain cases, Beckham, Brown, maybe Bell, maybe not, based on the franchise tag. But those guys got a lot of money, and they wanted and willed themselves into 3 and 4 win franchises. And now we're sitting around here. It must be March. We're talking about the Browns and the Jets winning the Super Bowl again, right?
Well, the Jets are one thing. The Browns made significant strides last year. I mean, they went from 0 wins to 7 wins, with a rookie quarterback being the catalyst for that. So I think we need to start viewing them in a little bit different context.
I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to give it up.
Well, you're going to miss the train then, because it's coming. I mean, they're a pretty decent football team. In reality, at the end of last year, they were, and then you see what they've done to this point. They're incredibly talented, and I think everyone in the AFC North needs to be prepared for that. Marlon Humphrey kind of joked that Antonio Brown finally gets out of the AFC North and Odell Beckham comes. But again, go back to the Ravens. It's not as though we're talking about a tanking scenario. Let's be very clear about that. This isn't rebuilding in the way that the Orioles are doing it right now, or that the Browns did it for years, or that some of these god-awful teams do it seemingly year after year. But it's a case of, all right, we have this cap space. Let's keep in mind we can also roll over cap space. So let's not just spend $25 million in cap space just to do it if we're not really all in on some of these players. And when I say that, I'm talking either keeping their own or going out and getting other players. The top 2 centers in the market came off the board. The offer that Matt Paradis ended up getting seemed very reasonable. And we don't know. Maybe the Ravens were in on that, but there's been no indication to this point that they were. So, they didn't pursue or get either of the top 2 centers on the market. They haven't done anything else through the tampering period. So, we'll see what happens once the signing period begins. Let's remind everyone of that. But it really is a case of looking at all of the evidence. They're building an offense from the ground up. They have a brand new quarterback that they drafted last year and had no intentions of playing last year until their starting quarterback got hurt. They have a number of veterans that they have let go. In the case of Eric Weddle and Terrell Suggs, they could have kept those individuals without
breaking the bank, right? Yeah,
right. Major consequence. Even if you say you're going to give Terrell Suggs $7 or $8 million for 1 year, yeah, you can say that's an overpay, but that's not crippling you in the big picture, right? I mean, and the same thing with Eric Weddle playing out the final year of his contract. They had the cap space to do that, and they elected not to. So, what does that mean? Okay, hypothetically, it could have meant that they were going to go out and get Landon Collins or Earl Thomas, and at the outside linebacker position, they could go out and still get someone. And I think they probably do, considering you have no idea what Tyus Bowser and Tim Williams are at this point. And if nothing else, you need another body to compete. So even if it's not a high-profile guy, I could still see that. Certainly the draft is an option there because Matt Judon's your only pass rusher right now, period. I mean, even Zadarius Smith and Brent Urban was someone that was an inside rusher for them, and who knows what's going to happen with him. So it really is a case of looking at that, looking at the reboot of the offense, looking at the number of players this year in the final year of their deal, or in a position where this is probably it for them. Go down the line: Jimmy Smith, Brandon Carr, Marshall Yando on the other side of the ball potentially.
Sam Cook. They're going to need a punter at some point.
Right.
And he won't be as good as Sam Cook, whoever the next guy is, by the way.
Sure. So most likely, you start to peel back the onion a little bit, and you look at this thing and say, okay, you can keep Eric Weddle and Terrell Suggs, but do you really think those guys being another year older, and they knew they were going to always lose Zadarius Smith, so that's not surprising. They wanted to keep C.J. Mosley. They were trying to keep C.J. Mosley. So when you lose him, then I feel it almost emphasizes the possibility even more that some of these older guys, are they really going to be around and still viable contributors when Lamar Jackson is really ready? And let's not use Patrick Mahomes as the standard here. Let's kind of look at the progression of young quarterbacks. And realistically speaking, Lamar Jackson probably next year, if he takes the necessary steps, that's when the Ravens are really going to maximize their window. So why spend on free agents now, knowing that it's a shaky investment, knowing then that you're going to lose your 4 compensatory picks that you're in line to have right now? And that's not to say they won't sign one free agent and they're down to 3, but you certainly look at some of the guys that they lost in third-round compensation for a C.J. Mosley or a Zadarius Smith, and you want to throw that away to go sign a free agent who, might help you this year, but might not really be all that viable for you next year and the year after that? Or do you look at the fact that you have a head coach now with a brand-new contract extension, you have a brand-new general manager, you have a 22-year-old quarterback, you made the playoffs and won the division last year, so that should give you a little bit of time. And look, again, not talking 2-14 scenario here, but you take the opportunity to look at some of these younger guys once and for all. You find out if Patrick Owasso is an every-down linebacker rather than the part-time guy he was last year. Same with Kenny Young. You find out a little more about Tyus Bowser and Tim Williams and see if they just can't play, or maybe they really do need more opportunities, and that was a big reason that was slowing their development.
You also find out whether you want to give Marlon Humphrey $80 million.
Well, I mean, Marlon Humphrey, I'm at the point now where I think you're getting a really good idea of what he is. He was terrific his rookie year for a rookie corner, and he got better last year. So I don't know if he's a guy you're really finding out more about, other than just, is he going to continue?
But you're thinking about him as an $18 million player on your cap in 2022 and 23 right now.
But he's not really the kind of – we know what he is at this point. I have no idea what Anthony Averett is. I have no idea what Chuck Clark can be other than a spot start or two that he made last year. Deshaun Elliott, the rookie safety from Texas that they took last year, who broke his arm in the preseason, but I know the organization likes him. Now, are you just going to plug and play him in place of Eric Weddle? I'm not at that point, but I think he could be in the mix, and maybe you can give him an opportunity to play. So, and then on the offensive side of the ball, yes, I want to see the Ravens draft a receiver or two, because receivers still need to matter to some degree in this offense, even if you're running the ball as much as they did last year. And, certainly you want to try to fortify the interior offensive line with an addition or two. So it's not as though you do nothing and just say, well, this team's going to be bad. And I want to be very clear, even if the Ravens lined up to play this Sunday and the season we're starting now, I still don't think their defense would be god-awful. It wouldn't be number one in the league anymore, but I think there's still plenty of talent you can point to, and then you kind of use this as a little bit of a test tube year, knowing then that you're going to have upwards of 11 or 12 draft picks next year, and some of those compensatory picks being earlier picks, and whatever cap space you end up not using this year, and you can try to extend Matt Judon. You can talk about Patrick Owasso or Ronnie Stanley or Michael Pierce, whoever you earmark as being someone you want to keep for the long haul. You make the focus more on those guys, and Eric DeCosta's talked about that. So you use that, you use your cap space to start getting the process going with those guys, and they've already done that with Kayvon Young. And then if you end up having $13 million in cap space left over, guess what? You can move that into 2020 when they have a boatload of cap space because they don't have a ton of contract commitments that will continue into 2020 for veterans. You have a better idea then of some younger players that if you were up against the cap and trying to win in the same way that they've tried to win the last 4 or 5 years, maybe you still wouldn't really find out about. And what will happen is a couple of those guys will pop, and the guys who don't pop, that's a position you need to address in next year's draft or in next year's free agency when you have so much cap space that you feel you can maybe afford to overpay for the right guy at the right position at the very least. Maybe it's not the perfect price, but it's at least the right player. So I don't know. I mean, that's just that's the theory that I'm starting to wonder if there are some legs to that when you look at all of the different variables at work here. Now, they go out and make 3 signings when the...
Oh, there's no doubt that it's still early, but, the
Sure.
top shelf, the expensive guys, kind of
Right.
come off during the tampering period. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We are intelligently, remember that part, discussing all things going on with the Ravens here during a transitional test tube period. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. I'm going to see Cal Ripken and Brad Jackson this week out at the JCC. They're doing an event there. We're going to be talking about the MATA event coming up over Community College of Baltimore over in Catonsville as well. LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. You've seen Cal on the billboard. You hear him here. And, they're taking great care of my elbow and my wife's shoulder as well. Strategic Factory, the marketing, the printing, the promotional goods, all in one shop, all in one place out in Owings Mills. They are a click away online to get the strategy. And I got business cards I need right now. I was on the phone with Fawn out there and Keith and the folks at Strategic Factory this week. I got some stuff I need. I'll be reaching to them. While I'm out in Owings Mills, probably be getting a haircut. Hammer Nails, our new sponsor. Big thanks to Brad and the group out there for doing that with us. You're going to find them out in Owings Mills on the town center. Stop by, say hello. They have a monthly deal there, a membership program. You get 25% off when you mention WNST. It's Hammer Nails. You see the shirt that I'm wearing here. It's a new concept. Go check it out. Get yourself a pedicure, sports pedicure as well. Hammer and Nails in Owings Mills. Last but never least, our friends at the Model Lyric. Big shows coming up there, including Bill Maher on June 9. Wow, I'm sneezing. Man, I start talking about spring, and I start to sneeze. How about that? Also, Doobie Brothers, April 12th coming up. I have Tom Johnston up in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault from the Doobie Brothers talking about the China Grove. Britt Floyd, that is the world's greatest Pink Floyd tribute band. I know Luke and his brother want to be a part of that on May 2nd. Frank Zappa hologram on May 3rd. There is always magic at the Model Lyric at ModelLyric.com, and it won't make you sneeze, even though I'm sneezing here. Luke, I guess I would just say this. You have made the case over the last 15 minutes, literally, monologuing in the voice of Eric DeCosta, literally trying to explain away what's happened here and what the strategy could be. And I'm not disputing that you might not be Eric DeCosta in disguise or have a pipeline, have ESPN into his brain at this point to know what's going on or what was said in Jupiter last month or what the realities of maybe Suggs won't want to play here. Maybe we'll lowball him a little bit, and if he wants to come back at this number, great. Same thing with Mosley. He's a $14 million guy, not a $17 million. Let's not tag him. Let's not franchise him. Let's not piss him off. Let's just... this is our taste for 2019 and where we are, and if it gets too rich for us, we'll just regroup, take our draft picks. This is plan B, but it's plan 1A, sort of kind of. I would say to you, where they are with my and I'll go back to this again. I'm going to hold this up for the camera again. This is my PSL. This is $1,444 on my PSL, and I got this, and everybody gets this, right, if you're a PSL. This is what they're up against when the Orioles have said we've quit for the next 3 to 5 years, really at the big league. At Camden Yards, we're going to be the duck paddling underwater while we lose 100 games. I don't know that the Ravens can say we're up for double-digit losses this year and we're up for having the 8th pick in the draft next year or the 2nd pick in the draft next year. And maybe that's where we get our next Terrell Suggs, or maybe that's where we get our next Josh Darnold, or I don't know. But you've made a hell of a case, and I'll just say this. Eric's a friend. I've known Eric 25 years. I have full trust in Eric. And we can explain it away from the intelligent side of the fence. But you're on Twitter. You're on Facebook.
Sure.
You're not the only one getting the... I understand it. I run a business. I understand sports. I understand the cyclical nature of all of this. I understand what they're doing. You have explained it away. But it's not easy to do this if you're Eric DeCosta and you're first guy on the job, right? It's not.
Oh, no question. And I want to be very clear. This could change very quickly. If they are targeting certain individuals and they're not broadcasting that to reporters behind the scenes, then all this talk about retooling, rebooting, rebuilding, reloading, whatever we're going to label it as, sounds pretty silly. So I want to be very, very careful about that. I am not privy to what Eric DeCosta is thinking, but I think for me, it really comes back to the same thing that we've talked about, we'll continue to talk about. It really comes down, and this is even the case for season ticket holders. How do you feel about Lamar Jackson? Period. I mean, that's how it goes with this. And
well, if that's the battery test, they're not. I mean, believe me, I mean, Dennis believes in Lamar. Did you find anybody that we talked to in Atlanta during a week of sitting there with every Baldinger, Jaworski, that would say, I am all in on Lamar. And I know how everybody felt about Lamar Jackson because they all passed on him on the draft last year. And I don't know if he were coming out now all over again, whether he'd be the first, second, third pick in the draft. I don't know whether the Jets would trade their guy for our guy. I know the Browns wouldn't, right? So I know we traded Joe Flacco. I don't know that John Elway would want Lamar Jackson over Joe Flacco this year and next year, over the next 2 or 3. I don't know. And it probably depends on how much money they have invested in Von Miller and where they are in really believing that Tom Brady's going to get old and turn his ankle at some point, and bad things are going to happen there, and Roethlisberger's no good and doesn't have any help around him, and Harbaugh's a great coach, but he doesn't have players, and, all of the pieces of this. But to think that the Jets, Oakland, and the Browns are going to make the playoffs because of their acquisitions the last couple, I'll believe that when I see it. I just will. I don't think the Ravens are any closer, and I can't make a case for what this is other than what you've said, because I think your analysis is spot on. If this is going to be a regroup and a rebuild, fine. If you're going to portray Lamar Jackson as the savior to try to sell tickets or confidence, fine. But my eyes in watching football for 50 years tells me he's an electric, special individual. I don't know that you can build a franchise around a guy who's you're one shoulder from a linebacker and his knee away from, I don't want to say chaos, but away from being a really bad football team if you don't have a backup quarterback.
Yeah, and that's fair, but there are questions about for every young quarterback that gets drafted. I mean, for every Baker Mayfield who has a lot of success as a rookie, there is 3 or 4 guys, and however many first-round quarterbacks, or let's throw.
Dude, this is a different cat. Every guy you're talking about, the whole idea is don't touch my quarterback. They give him a red jersey out there 4 days a week. Don't touch my quarterback. And if you're drafting a quarterback that you want to attempt to run over and around people in the middle of the National Football League, guys that are 290 and run. Maybe not 4.2, but they run 4.4, and I just don't. If you're selling the confidence of season tickets, and by the way, man, my seats are cheap, right? I have the cheap tickets. When I saw, someone shared how much those tickets below me cost, I kind of blown away. $3 and $4 and, $400 days and $500 days for me and my wife at a football game, and what I'm getting and what I'm expecting, and how crazy pissed off people have been here the last couple of days with the losses. And I know that's football steam to some degree, but we got a real problem with human beings coming to football games in this city right now. And beyond all of that, beneath whatever Eric does for the long term, whatever Elias does for the long term, right? And I both think they're very competent, capable, deep-thinking, long-term thinking guys. In the near short term, you got a lot of people here who don't want to come downtown, as you know, and don't want to go to games where they've already bought the tickets. I'm just, from a confidence level for the football, look, the baseball team, dude, come on. I mean, they can't win. The football team's all we got. And now over the last 48 hours, the people that have these bills to pay here and look at it and say, well, maybe I should come back when they're ready to win if they're not ready to win, because it doesn't. And to your point, 48 hours from now it could feel differently. But this has been a real kick in the nuts for the franchise, I think, for the fans to some degree. The notion that the football team's going to rebuild too, and the notion that Justin Tucker is the best athlete in our city, as I'm hanging out with Cal Ripken tonight.
And again, let's be very clear. I'm not calling this a full rebuild. And the Ravens have done this before.
You've called it a test tube and a transition and all that. I mean, I hear that.
Right, but the Ravens have done this before. 2013, they blew up a Super Bowl team. 2002, they blew up a team that was 1 year removed from a Super Bowl. So I hear what you're saying.
But they're starting this year with something they haven't had in a decade, which is a Super Bowl winning MVP, the guy, and you're going to say this guy is that guy. That's like telling me Cedric Mullins is Adam Jones at this point. Like I'm just not ready to believe that.
I understand, but we also need to be very careful here that we're not romanticizing something that had one playoff win over the last 6 years.
Fair enough.
And I'm not talking Joe Flacco specifically. I'm talking about, look, I love Eric Weddle. The Ravens won 0 playoff games while he was here. Terrell Suggs, they won 1 playoff game over his last 6 seasons.
C.J. Mosley, add him in there.
C.J. Mosley won 1 playoff game as a Raven. So at some point in time, we need to look at this thing and call it what it is. They've been pretty mediocre with this core of guys that they're now losing because other teams are paying a bunch of money to. Or in the case of Weddle, they said, we want to go in a different direction. So let's not act like we're the Ravens, even if they are reloading a little bit here, let's not act like they're breaking up the 2000 Ravens, because they're not. They haven't.
We just want to make sure we're not going to become the Redskins.
Well, but that's where people do need to show some semblance of intelligence in saying they haven't been that. Even over the last 6 years, they've had 1 losing season, and that losing season was a big catalyst for that was some ridiculous injuries. So at some point, we do need to give the organization some credit if they are going to kind of slow play this year a little bit, because they've spent to the cap every year the last 6 years.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, you and I, we're the intelligent ones here. I'm not crushing them for what they're doing.
Right.
I'm just saying this is a really dangerous time to do this, where I am not going to be renewing my PSL because I couldn't find anybody to sit in the seats last year. Right? And that's where they are as a business. That's
sure.
where we are as a community. You and I are going to be the intelligent ones here. I mean, I there's no doubt about that. I mean, what I see on Facebook and even in LinkedIn and allegedly intelligent fans and whatnot, there'll be some of us left. It's like baseball. You and I get what they're doing. They just have no goodwill left to do it with. Certainly not with me while I sit outside of press conferences. Certainly with the Ravens, where the owner has gone into witness protection all of a sudden. He's on a milk carton all of a sudden while all this is going on, and he wants $1,500 for me for something I couldn't give away last year. So I'm not being a dick. I'm going to be in Arizona next week. I'm just being honest. You know what I mean? Yeah. Luke Jones is here. He's Luke at WNST.net. By the way, dude, can I give a little love here during the segment, because you and I are going to be talking about this for the next 8 months, right? I got my UMBC hat. I got my Coppin hat. And they both have won, right? I mean, poor Morgan has lost. The ladies and the men both lost in the MEAC. But it's a big week for – we've lamented about how little college basketball you and I have talked and how much it sucked, right? And Maryland's been good, and no one's cared about Maryland. Nobody's going to the Maryland games either, right? And they're playing out in the middle of the afternoon in Chicago and hopefully get a good seed. But UMBC and Coppin this week, how about it, huh? Little hoops magic going on, and I just want to give some love. How about that?
Yeah,
Good?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Good. Very cool stuff.
Yeah. And I got to get a UMBC hat. I'm talking to Karinji. This one's been washed so many times. The creases, but it's got character. But it's crinkling up a little bit right around the basketball. So at least Coppin gave me a fresh hat. It's got a little bend to it. All right, dude. We'll anything else you want to say? I mean, we didn't even get into Beckham and Brown and Bell. You want to do that later?
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about Bell. I'll say this. If the Ravens were truly looking at this year as a year that they were pedal to the metal again and really putting their foot on the gas and trying to build off of what they did last year in terms of winning the division and making the playoffs, then I think not being in on Le'Veon Bell at the price that he got from the Jets, knowing the Ravens had the cap space, knowing what he offers as a receiver, then I question why they weren't in on him. I'll leave it at that. I mean, if you're truly in a position where you're really going for it all out this year, Le'Veon Bell is the kind of playmaker this team hasn't had for a long time.
If you're going all out, why didn't the Patriots take any of these guys? Because they didn't want them.
Well, I mean, we can't keep comparing. Until Tom Brady's gone, at least, making comparisons to the Patriots is bad in that way.
I just think there's a point where you just some of these three players, their personalities, their antics, all of that. Hey, I know they're great but there are certain guys, probably named Harbaugh, that would, at this point in their lives, at this point in the journey, just say, you know what, I'd rather have good people here and figure the rest out. Start with that. Have people that are team people in my room as opposed to bringing kryptonite into the den and having to deal with it every day. I mean, believe me, the Giants are going to miss him out on the field, but they're not going to miss him in a lot. And I assure you, for all we're kicking dirt on the Steelers, and they're old and they're tired and they lost good foot and all that stuff, I don't know, dude. They always
Yeah, they're not dead yet.
I mean,
I agree with that.
Hines Ward came and went, and they figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, and I think Tomlin's a hell of a football coach. And I think much like what you said to the Ravens, and maybe we should wrap it up with this and we'll go back to this, but what you said about Eric DeCosta, and hey, man, the Ravens have always figured this out. The Steelers have always figured this out. Let's not anoint Oakland and the Jets and Cleveland clubhouse leaders today because – suddenly they brought in a player, or two or three in the case of Cleveland. I don't know, dude. I'm not ready to kick dirt on the Ravens or the Steelers as franchises because they've had a rough week.
Oh, no, that would be silly. I'm just telling you on paper what the Browns look like right now. They'd be my favorites to win the division, period. I mean, they just would be. That doesn't mean the Steelers or the Ravens will stink, but...
And they also brought in a guy that's going to suck up all of the oxygen along Northern Ohio and all the money as well.
You know what?
And there's one football. And let's see how it goes. I think that guy is a turd. And I don't know if that's T-E-R-D or T-U-R-D, rhymes with nerd. I think he's a turd. I think he's a hell of a player. I know Antonio Brown's a turd. I mean, watching the Facebook, no sane, thoughtful individual does that to their football coach. There's no one does that. I mean, no one I want on my team in my organization. He wouldn't work at WNST. I don't care how great a host he is. How about that? That's how I feel about that, and I think Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh feel that way about it. We'll see what Freddie Kitchens and, Mayock and Gruden, and I don't even know who the hell the Jets coach is. It's the old Dolphins coach, right? Gase. So let them deal with these guys.
Yeah, but I also said at the end of the day, you need players. And the Ravens haven't had playmakers for years, and they have one playoff win over the last 6 years.
By the way, I'll take the Jets over the Browns right now. Can I say that? What's today, March? Just say before St. Patrick's Day.
You think the Jets are going to be better than the Browns?
Yes, I think the Jets will win. I think the Jets will win in the next 2 years, 3 years. Just give me 3 full years, okay? Because I don't want to judge this. Don't beat me up next year in Miami if the Browns win a playoff game and the Jets don't. I think long term, next 3 years, the Jets will be more formidable in January. Not Don't wake me up if one's 9-7 because the Browns win 13 games. But I think I have a far greater chance of seeing Sam Darnold on a billboard at a future Super Bowl in Los Angeles than I do the Browns. That's just my feeling. I could be wrong about that.
Okay. I completely disagree.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in Baker Mayfield. I am.
Okay.
I see how he's played, and I think he is everything that was the good part of Johnny Manziel without the bad parts of Johnny Manziel, and he's a heck of a lot more talented. So I'll take Baker Mayfield.
I'll argue with you later. We'll argue about this between now.
And by the way, I don't think Sam Darnold's necessarily going to be bad. I'm way higher on the Browns than I am the New York Jets right now.
I can't be high on the Browns. I don't think that's ever been used in a sentence before by you. But
telling you're going to miss that train, and all of a sudden they're going to be.
That's
really
a train
good,
I don't want to catch.
Baffled.
That's a train I don't want to catch. There, and a plane I don't want to be on. Believe me. J-E-T. That's a different kind of plane, right? Yeah, it's one of those Boeings. I don't know. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. He was and is Luke at WNST.net. And Baltimore, Luke, now we're having fun. I mean, now we're playing from behind around here at this point. We're out on Facebook Live and on our YouTube WNSTV channel. Everywhere social media goes, including the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 in WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.